Right. Here we are once again with Mr. YouTube's Board Game University. This is the first of my series on what I'm calling capitalist fantasies. We're going to be talking about Pipeline, which is the game that's laid out on the table here. I am a fan of this game, and so I don't want to say, I think there's a lot of games that are very similar to what this one does. But I don't intend to say, oh no, this is a bad design. I'm kind of trying to do like a little bit more of a meta conversation about, um, what a lot of games of this type do and how they end up like either failing or succeeding in engaging with like the propagandistic nature of capitalist fantasies in games. And again, I'm not the biggest fan. I am I have lots of my politics are not the subject of this episode, but I think one of the interesting things we can kind of see as we uh, talk about this game is the contradictions that um, are present in a system like capitalism, and how games that are kind of about winning by being the best capitalist have to kind of suppress or completely ignore those contradictions in order to function at all. So let's start with my little presentation here. I gotta pull this bad boy up here. We've got a also, I'm recording on like a record hot day, so my apartment looks a little bit like a cave. I had to turn all the air conditioning off so as to not mess up my brilliant mic setup here. So we'll just go as long as I can until I start just getting too shiny. All right, so turn that off, turn me off. All right, here we go. Oops. All right. Okay, so Pipeline. It's a game designed by Ryan Courtney. Done some other interesting stuff. He's made the pipe puzzle into another game called, I think, Trailblazers. He's got a fun little stock game called Bear Raid. But uh, Pipeline is a game about the S. But what is capitalism? And now this is going to be my like little crash course here. And obviously, we're not fucking nerds, so we're going to I'm going to gloss over a little bit and try to make this as simple as possible to make my point. So capitalism is essentially a system that prioritizes exploitation of forms of production. Now, what I mean by exploitation is getting out more than you put in. Um, the forms of production within capitalism are capital, which are things like trucks and rocks and simoleons, that kind of thing. Money. This is one of the forms of production. Um, Ownership of these various forms is advantageous, is an incentive within a capitalist system. Um, the more you can have these things and the more that you can use them, the better off you are. Another form of production is labor. So a little callback to a living planet. Here's labor. Here's our little guy here. And land. Um, Land is this green goopy stuff over here. So the thing about a capitalist fantasy is that it has to, um, in order, it's very difficult to create a simulation of all the things I just described. Um, and oftentimes that ends up being not fun because, surprise, surprise, capitalism isn't fun a lot of the time. But uh, in this case, what games end up doing is abstracting out various things, making them not important towards the simulation. So with a game like Pipeline, which we'll go into, Pipeline does not have any representation of labor at all. One of the pillar forms of production within this system. Often this is something, and I hesitate to call this propaganda, but this is the most common thing that you see within Euro style, capitalist production style board games, where labor is just not, you operate in a system where you just have perfect infinite labor. You get to do whatever you want, whenever you want. Some games, you have to feed your workers, but there is no. They don't get exhausted. They don't get tired. They don't die. They don't ask for better wages. They are robots, essentially. Um, Unfortunately, Pipeline does not have stocks, so we will not be talking about stocks today. Though in the future, with future economic games, I will probably talk about that. But um, Pipeline is a series of tubes. I just got this because I remembered when I was making this. I don't know if anybody else remembers this guy, but like this guy was like the longest serving senator in our government for a long time, Ted Stevens, and he said, again, the internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes. And if you don't understand, those tubes can be filled. And if they are filled, when you put your message in, it gets delayed, it gets in line, and it's going to be delayed by anyone that puts into that tube enormous amounts of material. Enormous amounts of material. Yeah, dude, a gerontocracy is great. We love it. Pipeline is a series of tubes, though. So let's hop out of here. Wait, hold on. We're back. Okay, we don't want to talk to Dan yet. Okay, so we're turning this stuff off. So what is Pipeline? How does it work? What kind of game is it? So Pipeline takes up a little bit amount of space. So I have, I'm going to just this is the game as set up. I'm not going to include each player area, but I will use this as an example to kind of describe how the game works. But basically, this is the board. Pipeline it's essentially like a large spreadsheet representing oil production and sale market. If you're expecting any sort of political commentary on the nature of oil production and sale, you're not going to find it here. So we're just setting that aside. This is a game about tubes. It's about the tubes. Okay? So what you do on your turn is each player has a little, human worker person. This is essentially a pawn that just says what action you're going to do. You place your pawn somewhere in this plus sign, and you do an action that interacts with the board. The other place you can place your little pawn is you can place it on your own personal pipe network to refine oil, and you can also place it on these little spaces to buy pipes. Now, the object of the game is to make the most money, is to exploit the flop, what you have here in the board, as efficiently as possible and better than the other players. What's interesting here is that, well, this is a style of game where what you do is 90% of the game is reading the board, looking at it and saying, what's the best pathway through here? What's the most exploitable path? So what you do in this game is, it's a little hard to see, but up here there's these numbers. So there's 3 types of oil. Each one is represented by one of these 3 cubes up here. And you see that the pipes correspond with the different types of oil. So there are 4 levels of refinement. Oil starts at crude, and you can refine it to higher grades of oil as you play the game. At the beginning of the game, the only oil available for you to get is these cubes down here, which are crude oil. So these are crude markets down here at the bottom. There's also crude markets up here. So this orange cube, I'm already wrecking it. But this orange cube is essentially that oil there. So what you do is you start with a limited amount of money, and you take actions to buy crude oil, you buy pipes, and then you run the oil of its respective type through its respective colored pipeline to refine it to higher levels. And these numbers here are saying to go from this level, you need 4 segments of pipe to go from crude to level 1. And so what a segment of pipe here is like, here's an example. Let's say somebody had built this in their own personal array here. We'll look at this little blue pipe here. It kind of snakes around. So the refinement value of a pipe is equal to the number of segments in it. So this pipeline has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 segments. So what that means is it could refine a blue cube from here to here, and if a cube was here, it could also refine a cube from here to here. That's what these numbers are saying. Now, I'm not going to get too in depth about how it works, but you can't do everything. You start buying machinery that lets you automate your pipelines because it's at the beginning of the game it's kind of inefficient to you run a single pipeline and it refines a single barrel of oil. What you want to do is eventually build up to having these machines that let you pay a flat sum and automatically run a whole bunch of oil through various pipelines. And then what you're trying to do is on this grid here, and I'm playing with this is, I think, probably the purest form of the game. It's like includes the expansion that was made for the game, which essentially like randomizes the sale and buy board at the beginning of the game. Um, but once you start refining oils, you can see when you sell, like, let's say I had maximally refined gray to the best version here. With an action, I could sell my oil there for $55. So if I'm playing my cards right, over the course of the game, I'll be buying this cheap oil, hopefully building up enough infrastructure to refine it, which will cost some money. But eventually, and if I automate effectively, I'll be able to start running that oil and making a net profit. All right. And that's essentially the like most of the game. There's these upgrades you can buy that give you like little special powers. That's mainly the only source of like random, there's the only randomness in the game is the starting values of things. So the values of everything change every game, but and then there's some special powers. You're also needing to store your oil, so you have to build places to hold it. And you're buying these pipeline tiles, which look like this, to build your own personal pipe network. And yeah, that's essentially, there's a few other things. You can get these repeating contracts that make you money over time. You have other things like this. There's these orders that are essentially like first come, first serve. First person to get it gets a bunch of money. At the end of the game, there is everyone's capital essentially is evaluated. So you score extra points, which is money in this game, for the ways the scoring is variable. So sometimes it's like, oh, what's your longest pipeline? You get some money for that. So it essentially, like, the game has an incentive structure built in that says, oh, when you build, you want to build in a specific way to maximize your points. Now, so that's essentially, the game in a nutshell. Now, like many games of this type, it is not very interactive. And what that means is like there isn't really a way. So the most interactive thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be messing around with turn order up here to determine the order in which everybody plays. That's the main point of interaction. And that all comes back to this sort of board evaluation thing that I was talking about. You look at the board, you look at what the best path is, and then you're going to try and sequence yourself to most efficiently accomplish that path. As far as interaction goes, it's usually like, if you look at this flop here, we notice that there are 3 different supplies of orange oil, 2 of blue, and 1 of gray. And what that means is, like, gray, if one player starts being the gray refiner, that means that the other players, if they're behind that player in turn order, they might want to choose to do something else. Unless the person who's doing this oil is just a dum-dum. You could also set up a system where maybe you are refining oil because you can also buy from these markets and then refine the oil further and then sell it back. So there are like examples of you maybe being like, well, this guy's going to refine this to level 1, but then I can go and buy that oil and refine it better. But most of the time you're better off just like building a chain for yourself. You just don't want to have that chain intersect. So this is not a game about like market manipulation or price wars or anything like that, because essentially whoever's getting to stuff first and doing it most efficiently is going to do that thing best. And if we're playing in a environment where we're assuming everybody is playing competently, which you should always assume, you should never assume that other people are dumb. That's not a good way to live. If you're assuming that everyone is playing well, the way strategically to approach this game is to try and find a path that you can control. And because of this, most of the interaction in the game is going to come from, oh, you took the oil I wanted before I could get it. That kind of thing. So, yeah. And so this is like the first video in this series that I'm making about these games, because you'll notice like all of the possible contradictions that could occur within this system have been kind of carefully filed away. For instance, each round, so the way the game works is it's played over the course of 3 years, but each year and each turn of each year, you get one action or two actions. You can do what's called a secondary, not important. I won't go too in, but basically but as the game goes on, there are fewer and fewer turns in the round. So as you get more efficient, you have less time to work with. On top of that, the game automatically refills these crude supplies. So each year, like this one here, is going to get 5 new cubes added back to it. These will also kick out some every year. It's an automated process. It's completely predictable. And so, one of the classic problems within capitalism is, the rate of profit declining over time. And when you have a system where there's just infinite supply coming in, like we could, this is never going, there's never going to be less than 5 cubes coming in here. You don't ever have to worry about like, oh, we're going to overproduce or we're going to overconsume. And even if those things do happen, they don't happen like very dramatically. So the game doesn't really function as a commentary on that kind of thing. It's starting to get hot in here. I'm doing great. I'm 16 minutes in. We're doing great, Thomas. Okay. So yeah. And, there's also like, there's just an infinite the only things that get depleted are these cheap supplies of pipes here. They will gradually deplete over the course of the game, but by the time typically in the over the these supplies of pipe always they get reproduced. And yeah, so there is like a diminishing supply of things over time, once again kind of corresponding to it being a turn order puzzle of sorts. But yeah, you're not running into any of, as when I start talking about games that are going to come later in this series, you're not going to run into many contradictions here. And because that's what I mean when I say a capitalist fantasy. This sort of thing is putting a player in the role of like, I'm Mr. Moneybucks and I have complete control over this economic system, which is a thing that like most people don't have, and is part of the appeal of fantasies like this. At least what it makes them appealing to me. Like I think this game is fun, and part of why it's fun is it's like, well, uh, you know, despite myself being like, pretty anti-capitalist in my life, it is just like a game about violence is sometimes enjoyable. This is also sort of sometimes enjoyable, even though, but yeah, you're not going to find much politics here. And I the games that I find very interesting often engage with that. When I talk about um, like some of the games that are going to come later, like Clinic. Clinic has some very interesting things to say about how capitalism works, but that'll be later. Anyway, so let's go back to my presentation, and I've only got really one good comment this time. Okay, so let's go back to PowerPointo. Um, so the first one, my favorite here is Dan Thoreau, Space Biff. Um, I think he pretty much summarizes everything there is to say about the game here, which is, ooh, excuse me. Pipeline traveled the entire parabola, from a confused first play to a radiant second to a downturn in the third, fourth, and fifth tries. It does so many little things well that its larger problems become sadly pronounced. I love the pipe maze puzzle, the need to carefully budget your turns, the broad thematic sweep of its arc. I wish people wouldn't say broad thematic sweep. All that means is the game, you get better at refining oil as the game goes on. I don't know if that's a thematic sweep. That just means, hey, you get that is a description of what occurs, not a theme or an abstraction. Anyway, the probability of runaway leaders and lack of recourse via player interaction, not so much. So he's being a little wordy here. I think the best way to describe what's going on is this game is a economic snowball. This is a term that like game people use a lot. It essentially, in so many words, this ends up describing what I think is the most common thing here. Let's make myself big. Ooh, it describes what is the most common thing in a game like this, which is if you think about a snowball at the top of the hill, you push the snowball like in a cartoon, and the snowball rolls down the hill, and it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That is what this game offers. That is what Pipeline is. It's a game of um, building a snowball, trying to build the best snowball, and then kind of starting rolling it. And that is there are hundreds of games that take this approach because it works. It's something that's like it's fun to build a snowball and watch it roll down a hill. There's a reason why people do this. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much all I've got to say about Pipeline. We will be going to some more nuanced, complex places next time. But yeah, give Pipeline a shot if you get a. I hear it's being redeveloped. I really hope they don't do like oh, we're not refining oil. We're cute forest animals. We're finding goo. I Some people find the oil refining theme a little bit dour, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. So until next time, I'm gonna go turn my air conditioning back on.